So this is my cat Avery, who apparently wants to help with this video, but is too big to sit in my lap because, well, he's a Maine Coon. So Maine Coon mix. So he's going to sit just right here and stare at me the entire time. Aren't you, Avery? That's what he's going to do. And I'm going to talk about this interesting category of books that is really weird. And yeah, I just used my phone. I'm 46 and I'm old. I'm middle age, but you know, that's old to a lot of people out there. So we didn't have this category called, okay, we didn't have this category called new adult when I was a kid in my 20s. And I know that's irksome that people call people in their 20s kids because technically they're not kids. They just have a lot more freedom than they would later on in life. I feel like I still have a lot of freedom because let me tell you a secret. Secret to freedom is don't have children. And I'm not telling you not to have children. I'm just saying that my children are felines. So my life is really happy compared to my friends who are my age and have kids your age. Actually, teenagers. Actually, if you're in your 20s, I could be your mama. I could have given birth to you, and that freaks me out too. So that's how old I am. But anyway, we didn't have this genre category, whatever, called new adult. And I think it's fabulous that it's out there because it keeps, parents from bitching about, their inappropriate shit and books for their kids. Parents are always going to bitch. That's always going to happen. Fortunately, I taught college English before the pandemic. I have not taught high school or anything under high school. And I don't ever want to do that. Yeah. But that's a whole other bottle of wine that we're not going to uncork right now. And instead of talking about issues in the educational system, we're going to talk about these demon books. And I love calling them that because I know there's a Christian somewhere that is shitting a brick over these books, And I think that's hilarious. It's just, God damn it. Okay, there we go. That's what happens when you only use a phone. But I think it's hilarious that that's a thing, that they are controversial. To me, it's like if they're not for kids, if they're not in schools, then I don't see what the problem is. But whatever. To each their own, I mean, that's the kind of person I am. But I talked about this author on another video back, and of course it's this one. It's Moz, the one that everyone's reading. And I don't understand the appeal to a lot of people who are in their 20s or 30s. I know people in their 30s too, like millennials. I'm a zennial, okay? I'm not an Xer. I never owned a pair of combat boots. They were doing that when I was in middle school. I'm not in my 50s. Xers are in their 50s, okay? So, yeah, this author right here is very popular. And she, writes a lot of smutty stuff. That's, what is it called? Romancy, fantasy romance. That was a word that we didn't have. I remember when I was in high school in the 1990s, I had this typing teacher, computer/typing. Yes, we had computer and typing classes. Did any of you learn how to type? I'm just curious if they still even teach that, or do they get rid of that along with cursive? That would be interesting to me to know. But anyway, she was one of those teachers that will tell you everything, okay? She was all into like fantasy romance before it was even a thing. She loaned me a couple books because, they were, racy books for her. Not like this though, not like this. Like we didn't have stuff like this that I knew of. I guess it would have been like anything like really racy would have been more like Colleen Hoover. And I know there's a lot of like snobbery about her books. I've never read any of her books because to me she sounds like Danielle Steele, and I didn't like a lot of Danielle Steele novels. And y'all don't remember this, but the boomers were all about Danielle Steele. Like that was a salacious author back then. It wasn't Colleen Hoover, it was Danielle Steele. So I guess every generation has theirs. But be nice to people who like different books than you. It's okay. It's okay. It would be boring if we all had the same taste. Look, I have a master's in English literature and I ain't being snobby to nobody. Okay? I'm just saying that. Anyway, this book right here, how to put it down, how to put it down, because the main character is really slutty. And I should have expected this. Like, I should have. But I took my bookmark out and I told my husband, I said, I think I'm too old to read this. And then I saw another booktuber, whatever they're calling this, booktuber, like talking about this book. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to read it because she was on the second one. I'll try to go back and see who it was and link her in this. But she has a really, really pretty YouTube channel. And I love her aesthetic. It's very clean, very crisp, modern. So I'll try to find her video and link it. And I'm going to try to finish this one. I've read books this length longer because, like I said, I got a fucking graduate degree in English literature, and that kind of goes with the territory where you've read a whole bunch of books. But I don't know if I can. This is about 800 pages of smut. Now, the reason I'm calling this is in the demon category because it's a fallen angel, like the love interest or something. The dude bro guy is like a fallen angel, so that's technically demon. This is more like sort of anachronistic than the Akatar series, which took place in a fantasy realm. You know, it's not Tolkien or Tolkien, however you prefer to say it, whether you're American or British, I don't care. Yeah, it doesn't take place quite in a fantasy world like that, like the Akatar did. This is more like a mix of modern fantasy world. Like I think they have like vehicles and stuff, and they have technology, and it's weird because there's vampires in here too, and there's shifters, and there's like shapeshifters, I guess, like werewolf type creatures. So they didn't have quite, I mean, there were some authors that were doing things like that back then. Piers Anthony was one, and I read a couple of his books. They were adult. They weren't like labeled new adult, but they were just sci-fi, classified science fiction. Ooh, and they had some scenes in them. But Piers Anthony, if you guys are interested in something that's kind of like this, that's older, look at Piers Anthony. And that's the only author that really comes to mind. I know there were several men that actually wrote more like this back in the day than women. That's weird. There was another one that wrote about like cat people, like werecat people, and I can't remember his name, but he had a couple of books out, and I read one, and I read that one as a teenager, and I didn't even know that they even wrote sex scenes like that, for real. So, and I was someone who read lots, like was at a high reading level too, but I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, classic stuff that's now considered classic. And back then, things that would have been considered classic that were older, like, you know, like Lovecraft and all his peers from back in the day, the pulp fiction authors, as well as a lot of the classic sci-fi stuff or sci-fi fantasy like C.S. Lewis. This is not that. This is not that. This is not that. Like that kind of stuff. It's more like, again, the precursor to this would have been someone like Piers Anthony. But anyway, it's the main character is really slutty, and I'm sure you guys have already read this book. She's like half human, half elf. And my husband, I was telling him about this book. I said, that's kind of weird. He's like, well, you know, if a randy elf got with a randy human, I guess the child would be slutty too. So I was like, okay, that doesn't exist in the real world, but we can pretend like it can exist in a fictional world, which is fine. But yeah, so my aunt is a boomer. Obviously, my parents are boomers. Like, my aunt is American Korean, so she spent her first 6 years in Korea, and we trade like a lot of folklore books and stuff. Like, but she's really gotten into like the modern like fantasy stuff. Or I guess one day this will be considered folklore 500 years from now. That's going to be weird. Yeah, and she wants to read this. I sent her the Akatar series, and she's like, but I don't know. I don't think I'm going to read. I don't know if that series is over, but I'm not going to read no more Akatar stuff. That whole series was just really weird to me. But this is like, yeah, so it's a half angel guy who's like a demon or something. Because fallen angels are demons. She's half elf. And I'm only just a few chapters in, but I'm sure it's going to get weird. And I don't know. I mean, weird is good, right? I mean, I always thought I was pretty weird because I was that kid in school that, you know, I did ballet, but I had Star Trek posters all over my room. Like, I was into Star Trek before it was cool, when Deep Space Nine was on TV. That came out when I was in high school, Deep Space Nine. And that was my favorite Star Trek. So I was a dork. I was just a dork, okay? And the trifecta of my teenage years was basically Cats, ballet, and Star Trek. And I know that seems really weird, but you know, when you live in a small southern town, you don't really have a lot. So I was considered very like cosmopolitan and worldly because those were my interests. Because everybody else was like into, you know, typical stuff back then: sports, football, just white trash stuff. Because you know, I went to high school in Alabama. So, but anyway, times have really changed. Even in Alabama, times have really changed. But it's still backwards. It's still not like the rest of the country. This is another one that I'm putting in this category of demon books, demon romances, demon romances. So it's fantasy romance, new adult. I like those categories. They're fun. They're fun. So, but this one actually is more young adult because it's not spicy. There's no sex in this book. And I liked that. Okay. Yeah, I know I'm old. I'm old. But you know, I don't need to read about someone else's sex life. It's just, I don't care if it's just a fictional character. I don't need to know those details. That's just my preference. So I preferred this series and I went ahead and ordered the second book. Apparently, these came out 10 years ago, but this is a fantastic series. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. Like, I flew through this book in a day or so. So it was cool. And this is the one book that I actually told my husband about, you know, because there's chimeras in here. There's angels and the demons are called chimera, and the demons can be reborn, and an angel and a demon fall in love. The back of the book just says really cool things. And it builds the world. It takes place in today's world, like a version of today. Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well. And I read that and I'm like, sold. But it's really cool because she's obviously the demon character. She has magical powers, and he's the angel, and he has magical powers. But the angels in this book are actually really fucked up. Like, they're the bad guys. And yeah. But I like that. You know, I like it when it kind of turns the world on its head, and the anti-heroes are the anti-heroes. You know, I think that that's great, and that's pretty cool. So anyway, this one, Fallen Angel. A lot of people consider fallen angels demons, even though technically you could say semantics. They're not really the same thing, but if you're looking at the mythology of Christianity and Judaism, and anyway, and in Islam they're called jinn. But I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to say fallen angel, demon here, the guy, the boy, and it's a take on what I'm getting from this. Just 9 chapters in, it's a take on like the mythology from Judeo-Christian mythology, but not. It's not like obviously a Christian book. Okay, I mean, you know, I wouldn't be reading if it was. So in this series is fantastic, and I think this is more young adult. I have really enjoyed this. I think this. I wouldn't have a problem if I had a kid, and I don't. But if I did, I wouldn't have a problem with them reading this book at all because there's just not a lot of there's no smutty sex in there. You know, it's not that way. So shit, I think that's a good book. That's the one that I would say, okay, you know, someone in high school could read it. This, I thought this is going to be a good book, and I'm not saying it wasn't a good book. It was decent, man. So first of all, that is a demon and that's a witch. Okay, so it's really cool. It's a good story. It's funny, but I'm not jiving with the setting, like the world. Again, it takes place in like around Washington State in today's world, but it's an alternative version of today's world. I mean, it's not literally today's world. Obviously, it's fiction. But this one is about one of the demons, goetic spirits. Let's just go ahead and call them goetic spirits because, you know, if you've studied the occult or anything like that, demons have their specialty. He's a soul bargainer, and he basically is there to try to take her soul, like strike a deal with her. She summons him by accident, and can't get rid of him, can't get rid of this guy, this demon guy. It turns out he's actually a really good guy. He's actually a really decent guy. And she's cool too. So they hit it off, and then they have to rectify this whole issue of how are they going to be together, because it's this book has a lot of spice in it. It's more toward the end, you know. So I don't know, that's just not my thing. But if you like that, you know, this book does have spice. It does. Not like this one. Like if you're looking for some demon fallen angel shit and you want some spice, these two books are your books. I prefer Smoke and Bone, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, because I just think that this is just like, it's a more interesting world. It's like when they don't put a lot of spice in, I've noticed that the character building in the world, the fictional reality in their world that you're reading about is just more kind of technicolor and fleshed out and just intricate. And so I like that one. I like that series. So anyway, that's it. Those are the demon books that I have to talk about. Demon romances. I can't believe that's a thing, but hey, I support that. I don't have anything against it, you know. Hell, you know. I joined the Satanic Temple when they started protecting reproductive rights. So, you know, Ave Satanas. Okay. Y'all have a good day and check out those books if you want to. If that's your thing.